Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about a different kind of dating. No apps, no awkward dinners, just aged paper, watermarks and a 350-year-old paper trail. We're talking about dating Leibniz. When you look at the sheer volume of writings Leibniz left behind, you quickly realise he was something of a hoarder. He wrote on anything he could get his hands on, from large sheets to torn off scraps. From margins of books to the backs of letters and envelopes. And more often than not, he didn't bother to write down the date. This means the editors of his writings have to become detectives, and that's what I had to do in my new 3-volume edition of Leibniz's philosophical papers. And sometimes the evidence suggested that long accepted dates were simply wrong. Let's look at one case from the new edition. Here's a text entitled On Controversies. It reads like a transcript of a conversation between Leibniz and a deceased prince about Leibniz's method for resolving controversies, especially religious ones. His method involves appointing a rapporteur to write down the controversy in a completely neutral way, so that a reader can't tell which side the rapporteur favours. Leibniz says he decided to record this conversation because he has now revived his work on religious controversies after finding another prince who is no less enlightened than the deceased one. He doesn't name either prince, but he does say he has been asked to write about the marks of the true church. On Controversies has been published several times, and every edition has dated it to 1680. Before we see why that date is wrong, we need to understand why it was suggested in the first place. And for that we have to look at the manuscripts. There are actually 2 manuscripts. There's Leibniz's original draft, which we've just seen, and there's a later copy made by a scribe in Hanover about a century afterwards. At the top of the copy is a note added by a librarian called Young. It reads, Mr. Leibniz's project to end the controversies of religion, in which he records his discussion on this subject with a great prince, apparently the late Duke Johann Friedrich of Brunswick. Now, Duke Johann Friedrich was Leibniz's employer when he arrived in Hanover at the end of 1676. The Duke died at the very end of 1679. So Young assumed that On Controversies recorded a conversation that Leibniz had with Duke Johann Friedrich. Later editors then accepted this, and they reasoned that if the deceased prince was Johann Friedrich, then the no less enlightened prince that Leibniz mentioned must be Landgrave Ernst von Hessen-Rheinfels, a German noble with whom Leibniz began corresponding in May 1680. And that is how the date of 1680 became standard. Leibniz refers to a deceased prince, and Johann Friedrich died in 1679. Leibniz says he's now found another enlightened prince, and he began writing to the Landgrave in 1680. If both of these identifications are correct, then On Controversies would indeed belong around 1680. The theory even has some superficial plausibility, as both the Duke and the Landgrave were interested in theological controversies, so the pieces seem to fit. But the manuscript of Leibniz's original draft tells a different story. First, the watermark of the paper of Leibniz's draft is attested between 1677 and 1678. So already a date of 1680 looks very shaky. Second, the manuscript doesn't just contain On Controversies. On the same sheet is a crossed out draft letter to Duke Johann Friedrich from March 1677. Unless Leibniz kept a sheet of paper on his desk for 3 years before turning it over, it's far more likely that he wrote On Controversies in March 1677 as well. And that's not all. In On Controversies, Leibniz says that he's been asked to discuss the marks of the true church. And in that crossed out draft letter to the Duke from March 1677, he touches on, yes, the marks of the true church. This strongly suggests that it was Johann Friedrich who asked him to address the topic in March 1677. By contrast, there is no evidence that the Landgrave or anyone else asked Leibniz to write on this subject in 1680. All of this points to a much earlier date for On Controversies, March 1677, not 1680. This earlier date also fits Leibniz's broader activity. In the first half of 1677, shortly after arriving in Hanover, he produced several writings on theological controversies, apparently at the Duke's request. On Controversies fits neatly alongside these. If we now revisit the old 1680 date, we can see that it rested entirely on Young's 18th century guess. He assumed the deceased prince that Leibniz mentioned was Duke Johann Friedrich. But the evidence, the watermark, the draft letter on the same sheet, the reference to the marks of the true church, that all points in a different direction. Johann Friedrich wasn't the deceased prince. He was the no less enlightened prince that Leibniz had just found. So who was the deceased prince referred to in this text? The only plausible candidate is Baron Christian von Boinberg, who was Leibniz's employer during his years in Mainz. Boinberg died in 1672. He was deeply interested in theological controversies. He was the one that encouraged Leibniz's Catholic demonstrations project. He fits the description perfectly. So with this, we get a far more coherent picture of when and why Leibniz wrote On Controversies. The new account is grounded not in guesswork, but in careful detective work, internal and external manuscript evidence. Revising the date from 1680 to 1677 shifts our understanding of Leibniz's early theological work in Hanover by 3 whole years. Just as importantly, it shows us that Leibniz came up with this method for resolving controversies much earlier than previously thought, as the conversation in which he outlined it must have occurred in 1672 or earlier, during Boinberg's lifetime. And that matters. Philosophy isn't just a list of ideas and arguments. It's a story of a mind in motion. Getting the dates right lets us see Leibniz not as a statue, but as a thinker responding to his world in real time. You can explore the new timeline for On Controversies and many other writings in the 3-volume edition of Leibniz's Philosophical Papers, out at the end of April. Thank you for your kind attention. In the next video, we'll look at recovering lost passages from Leibniz's manuscripts. We'll be capturing Leibniz.